Hello everybody and welcome. It's Morgana here with this week's watercolour tutorial, A Walk in the Rain. Today I'm going to be demonstrating for you this slightly different painting, which I hope you'll still enjoy. Before we begin, a quick bit of info for all of you out there who are interested in our paints. This painting today was done using the Davidson's Pigments Deep Forest Tinted Graphite collection, which we do now have some limited number back in stock, available in my Etsy store, which I will link to below. Our first batch of these sold out really quickly, so I'm really excited to have them available for everybody once more. We are also introducing a new limited palette set called the Wild Earth collection, which was chosen and curated by the wonderful Davidson, who did this beautiful autumnal painting using it, which you can actually head on over to her channel to watch her demonstration of this painting. I'll pop a link to that below in the video description as well. But that's that's enough waffle from me for now. Let's get on with it, shall we? So I'm using Saunders Waterford cold press paper today, which is a 100% cotton paper, weight 140 pounds, and you can see I've got it just taped onto my board, which is set at a slight angle, and all I'm doing to begin with is just giving it a good old wash with some clean water. And I'm just going to let that sit and soak into the paper just for a minute to get it all nice and soaked in. Now I'm beginning today with a really nice simple wash background. I'm using our tarnish, which is a beautiful colour, in fact my favourite colour, I must admit, from the Tinted Graphite collection. It's a wonderful sort of smoky, almost a gold colour really when you use it thickly, but without that metallic sheen you get in gold paints. It's sort of, you can see it's almost got a slight yellow tint to it here, which actually works really well if you're going to do a sort of any kind of urban painting or setting that perhaps has some rain in it. It's got that graphite gives it a lovely sort of greyish tint that is quite difficult to replicate. However, if you don't have the collection, you can always perhaps mix up a little bit of yellow ochre or raw sienna, perhaps like a nice strong yellow, with a little bit of lamp black or Payne's grey. And you can see here this is quite a simple wash. It's all one colour, and I'm using my my sturdy 2-inch wash brush to create the marks here that are going to set out the layers in this painting. So the bottom half I've done in horizontal sweeps, and now this top half I'm putting in vertical sweeps just to get some differentiation. You can see the lovely sort of granular nature of this graphite paint is giving it a lovely texture on that cold press paper, and actually you can use the brush to make these marks during the wet and wet, and they will stay to some extent. And now just an extra little touch of brightness. This is some permanent yellow paint, just regular watercolour paint, not a tinted graphite, just to give a little extra shine and brightness to this side, like a little bit of light spilling in from the rain clouds, perhaps brightening this painting just a little bit. And you can see I'm just introducing that in these careful sweeps, just going from the top left corner and just bringing it down and letting it soften into the paint that's already there. Using the water, just let it all sort of soften together and blend really, really nicely. Now the next thing we need to do is put in our pathway. So again, really simple. Just use your brush to pull down from that horizon line in these lovely long confident sweeps and just mark out your pathway by pulling that paint down, so you get this lighter directional marks, and it's literally as simple as that to create a really simple pathway. Of course, if you are uncomfortable with these sort of things, you know, like sort of cityscapes and perspective lines and this sort of thing, as always, you can always mark out things like your horizon and your pathway and your perspective in pencil underneath before you start painting. I just did this by eye, I must admit, but it seems to have worked out all right. And now I'm just going to start painting in some figures now that the first wash is dry. And I'm using a small synthetic round brush. This is a size 4 synthetic round Princeton Neptune little brush to do this. It's a really great brush actually. Love a little round brush for sort of it's fairly detailed work like this. And I'm trying to paint quite loosely. You can see I'm not worrying too much about the figures looking hyper-realistic and entirely sort of anatomically correct, if I must be honest. I think these sort of figures work really well if you just follow a really nice sort of loose outline of sort of people standing. You just need a sort of wider shape for the torso, and then a line for the legs, or a couple of lines if they're walking, perhaps. Like these fellows here, they're turned to the side, so I've just done really simple line and a little bit of an umbrella because, of course, this is a rainy painting. We've got that lovely tinted graphite background, which I think makes a really lovely sort of get that sense of like a murky, misty, rainy day. Perhaps it's 5 o'clock on a Friday evening and everybody's trying to head home for their supper and for the weekend. And as you can see, I'm just varying the size of my figures depending on the placement. So this chappie here, he's a little closer to us, he's in the foreground, so I made him larger. And you can see just as simple as that, a little blocky shape for the torso, line for the leg, and we've got his umbrella there, of course. And I'm just going to go ahead and pop in these figures. I didn't really have a real plan for these, I just decided to put them in wherever it looked like they fit. Just in the general composition of the painting. I'm using the hematite paint from our Tinted Graphite collection to do this, which is a lovely sort of fierce black paint, which still has it has a slight shimmer, you could say. All of these paints in fact have a slight shimmer from the added graphite powder. It gives it that slight hint of shimmer as though you would get in a pencil drawing or a graphite drawing. You know, the graphite, it has that very faint sheen, not a glitter, but a very faint sheen. So all these paints have that element. But of course, with something like this, all you need is a dark paint for the figures. So again, lamp black or Payne's grey or even Indian ink would serve you really well here as well. And just go ahead and pop in as many or as few figures as you like, really. I was having so much fun with painting these figures in that I just put in as many as I could squeeze onto that pathway. This fellow here looks like he's got a little shopping bag to carry, or perhaps he's given up on his umbrella and is carrying it folded next to him. Yeah, you can tell whatever stories you like with figures like this. That's one of the reasons I enjoy painting this so much. You can see this is me just trying to squeeze in a couple more figures there, just trying to figure out where to where to put the last few ones. And like I said, you can fill your path with as many figures as you like, or as few as you like. If you'd rather the slightly more minimalist approach, then by all means just pop in a couple here and there, or if like me you just get a bit carried away, well then there's nothing wrong with that, I think. And now just on this right hand side over here, I'm popping in a couple of street lamps just to line our path, and you can see I'm able to get that nice straight line really simply by using a flat brush. And just edge that in there, just using that lovely flat chisel edge. And just using the little round brush to add in a few details. Nothing too much, not going too wild here. Just a gentle little bit of detail here, and just of course we need the outline of the lamp itself. And just a little hint of detail there, just to give it that little bit of realism. So I'm just going to go ahead and pop in 3 of these, and just making them obviously smaller the further away they get from us, from the viewer, into the midground here. So we've got this one I'm making a little over half the size of the one I've just done. Again, exactly the same technique, lovely and quick with that flat brush. Now, of course, if you are more well prepared than I am, you can certainly draw out in pencil these shapes to begin with. You can draw out your lampposts, your perspective lines, etc. And if you like, you can pop a little bit of masking fluid into the area where your street lamp is, and that will of course keep the paper lovely and white whilst you're putting on your grey rainy wash. So that you can then of course rub it off and have that lovely bright white paper, that light showing through. I wasn't that prepared, can you tell? So I'm going to use a little bit of white gouache later on to make those nice and bright. But for now we are moving on to the tree. I just decided to put in one big old statuesque lovely tree along the side of this path. And I'm using my large Pro Art synthetic sword liner brush to do so. It's a really lovely brush for this sort of work. It's a little bit wayward, it's a little awkward to control sometimes, but I think for natural shapes perhaps that's no bad thing. So I'm just going in and putting these really sort of lovely loose, quite thick branches. I'm going to daub in a little bit of foliage over this, so I'm not worrying too much about it looking too heavily detailed, but I do want that structure in place for the tree before I add in the leaves over the top. For this tree as well, I should add that I'm again using the tarnished colour from the Tinted Graphite collection. So the background wash is what it looks like when diluted with plenty of water, and this is what it looks like when you use it a little bit more heavily. Stuffing in a little bit of shadow there with the little round brush. Don't worry, we'll come back to that. We'll do a little bit more of that later on down the line. So here you can see I've just switched out to a smaller brush as well. This is my size small sword liner brush, so same brush, just different size. Just using it to put in some sort of thinner, more twiggy branches. And now to pop in the foliage for this tree, I'm using another tinted graphite from our collection. This is Pine Needle, which is a lovely sort of rich, deep, dark green colour. And I'm just beginning to daub it on with a large round brush and just sort of begin at the sort of middle of the tree, and I'm working my way outwards towards those outer branches, just doing some quite loose little marks here and trying to make sure I leave a little bit of the background, sort of the light peeping through the foliage as you would naturally see. I'm also adding a little touch of the yellow paint again, our lovely permanent yellow, that I'm going to begin to mix in with the green as I begin to get towards the sort of the outer reaches of the foliage, to give that lovely variation, a little bit of extra lightness and colour, and just to echo, of course, that lovely light, that lovely yellow paint we've got coming in from the left hand side still. A lovely substitute, perhaps, if you don't have the graphite collection for this, would be a Peroline green, perhaps, which also has that lovely sort of depth and richness of colour. Or, of course, you can certainly mix up your own. So now I've done my tree. I'm just going to let that dry. I'm just going to start on the popping in some reflections on the pavement for our figures here. So I'm using exactly the same paint as I used to paint them in, but just watered down a little, so it's the same colour, only a little bit lighter, as you would naturally get with the reflection. Of course, it's a rainy day, so our path is strewn with water, so we need those reflections to just pop out and just give us a little bit of extra detail. And again, just using really loose brush mark and just doing that wiggly old line coming down, starting just a millimetre or so below the foot of the figure. I'm not attaching it entirely to the figure, if that makes sense. I'm beginning it just slightly below where the figure is standing, and then just bringing that little gentle wiggly line just down, echoing the shape and the height of the figure that I've put in, and that just gives us that extra little detail that I think really helps with this sort of painting. And of course, don't forget the lampposts as well. They need their own reflections too. A really simple matter to just pop in a few lines here and there, and I think this is one of those sort of little touches that can really help bring a painting together. To me, that already looks a lot better now that I've just put those little grey reflections there. And speaking of reflections, it's time to put a little bit more detail into this side on here, on the left side of the painting. Using my little round brush, you can see I'm just drifting it over the paper, stuffing in these sort of horizontal lines almost all the way up to our horizon mark there. This is just going to really loosely give the impression of a nice little bit of shine and reflection in the ground here. Give that impression of rain perhaps glistening off the grass, because this, for me at least in my head, this painting is set walking through a beautiful park of some sort. As you can see, I didn't put in any sort of extra detail like buildings as such in the background, so we've got these lovely wide open spaces next to the path which just need a little bit of extra detail to bring them together. And to stuff in this detail, you can see here I'm varying between using a little bit of our dark green pine needle colour and a little bit of the original tarnish colour that I used for the background as well, varying between a bit of light and a bit of dark. And I think those horizontal lines just help to complement the, of course, the verticality of our figures just to the right there, and just give that lovely impression of the rippling, sort of the gleam of water coming up off this little soggy patch of ground. And now I'm just going to add in a little bit of bright light coming from these street lamps here. So I'm using an opaque white gouache to go over the sort of darker watercolor colour. And I've mixed it with a touch of the yellow paint that I'm using, permanent yellow as well, to give that sort of yellowy electrical light sort of glow. And you can see that's gone really nicely over that darker paint. The opaque white is a really, really good thing to have, I think, in your watercolor collection. And now I'm just going to repeat the same process as before, just stuffing in a little bit of detail along the right hand side of the path, just getting again that impression of the water sort of shimmering alongside here on that nice sort of wet, soggy, damp grass. And I dare say that the observant among you will have spotted that that tree has grown a little bit as well. I decided to add a little bit more bulk to the foliage, just off camera, just quickly, just using exactly the same technique as I showed you earlier. But just for me, once I sort of took a step back and looked at the painting, the composition wasn't quite right for me, it wasn't quite working. So I just went in and added a little bit more tree detail and just sort of bulked it out a little bit, had it sort of leaning over the path slightly more. So now we are basically done with our painting. The last touch for me, of course, is to introduce a few birds. Those of you who follow my paintings know that I will almost always find some terrible excuse to put some birds in, and this is an urban painting to some extent, so I'm introducing a little flock of pigeons. And to do this, I'm just using the round brush, just using the point of it, and to just sort of flick upwards in a V shape, so you get that sort of ragged irregularity in the shape of the bird in flight, but you also get that slightly bulkier shape that you don't want for if you're doing sort of a seagull or a bird that has those sort of longer flight wings. Pigeons are sort of smaller, they're a little bulkier, they're a little more compact. So that's how I paint my pigeons. Of course, if anybody else has any suggestions for alternate ways to do it, pop it in the comments below. I'd love to read. Always love reading about people's bird stories. And you can see as well, they're just popping in a couple of little pigeon fellows petting around on that ground as well. All you need is just a slight wiggly shape, and of course the reflection as well. Don't forget to add that in too. So there we have the finished painting. Thank you everybody very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, something slightly different from my regular landscape, but I hope you found it interesting nonetheless. I also hope that you will follow the link below and check out our tinted graphite collection on our Etsy store, as well as the brand new, of course, Wild Earth limited palette collection as well. But that's all from me today. Thank you very much again for watching. A huge thank you to my Patreon members who help support this channel. I hope you enjoyed, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon in the next video.